Why are Celtic supporters so unhappy with their club? Is Martin O'Neill's magic running out? And just what do Celtic do about tonight's game in Stuttgart? I'm Charlotte Cohen, and alongside Scott Allan and Stephen McGowan, we'll be taking a look at what's going wrong for the Scottish champions. Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Thursday the 26th of February. And today we are all about Celtic.
And it comes a big chance. And Araujo scores! Oh, what a finish once again! Julian Araujo in amongst the Celtic fans. The Celtic fans come onto the pitch. They cannot quite believe it.
Is Celtic's last minute magic running out? What shape are their title hopes in after defeat to Hibs?
Oh, and they might have a problem here. Thomas is in, and it's goal number 4. That's it. That'll finish the tie.
We'll look back on last week's humbling defeat to Stuttgart. And what's the move for tonight's game in Germany?
I mean, we've got very, very, very decent players here at the football club. So all players, I think, in the squad have all played in the first team. So it's not this is not this whatever side we put out won't be a weakened team because the players are capable of playing.
We are covering all of the Parkhead bases right here.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
And alongside me to do that, I am joined by former Celtic midfielder Scott Allan. Scott, how are you feeling about tonight's game?
I think obviously after the first leg, obviously losing so heavily in the end with some of the goals that were given away, I think realistically it's a bridge too far tonight for Celtic to go over there and get a win. I think the domestic games now are far more important, and it's a game probably Celtic and Martin O'Neill, looking at it after the first leg, probably wished they didn't have to play tonight. But that is what comes with playing with a big club. You have to have games, fixtures after fixture, and this next couple of weeks for Celtic is huge. The only thing I'm looking at tonight is can they get a positive result and performance first and foremost to maybe get some momentum going into the game at the weekend.
And alongside us to chat about all things Celtic, Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer at large. Stephen, do you agree with Scott? Bridge too far for Celtic tonight?
I think Celtic would take a 3-0 defeat now, to be honest with you. Just take their beating, get out without any more injuries, without any serious blow to their morale, and lick their wounds and start preparing themselves for Sunday and for bigger challenges ahead.
Yeah, we'll come on to tonight's game in a little bit, but let's start with the fan unrest because it's been bubbling away for a while now. I think it's now 26 games that the Green Brigade have been banned for. Callum McGregor admitting the other day that it has taken its toll on the team. Scott, how much do you think this fan unrest off the pitch is impacting the guys out there on the park?
Well, I think, the unrest has been since the Kairat Almaty game where there's been tensions, basically the full season. I think now, at such a crucial point in the season, I think this is when you do need to be connected, whether that's, forget the board and the fans and players. I think when you're having your struggles and you're maybe not performing well, that extra lift for the fans is crucial. But at the same time, when you're not performing well, fans are getting on you with the pressures of playing for Celtic, so it can work both ways. But I do feel at this stage of the season, this is probably the time where the Celtic fans and players especially, they have to be connected going into this last part of the season because there's so many big games now coming up for Celtic and ultimately they aren't performing consistently well enough. So that extra bit of support, especially that noise and atmosphere, that can just be that little bit of edge that you need getting into a game at the weekend. Celtic 26 games, you obviously say there, without the Green Brigade. It's a long time, something a lot of the Celtic players aren't used to. Turn up to the games, look at the game last Thursday, it was really flat from minute one. And when you don't have the performance on the pitch to lift it, the fans are crucial. So I think everyone at Celtic now is being affected by it.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, Scott, you mentioned that the atmosphere being super flat last week. The atmosphere, Stephen, has been pretty dire at Parkhead for a while now. I mean, can you remember a time where it's been this bad, this flat, this quiet, this almost toxic?
Well, it wasn't great towards the latter stages of Ronnie Dyler's season, if you remember, where the top half of a tier of a stand was pretty much was empty. So they've had their moments before. I mean, I don't think there's any question that Green Brigade bring colour, they bring vibrancy, they bring noise, but they also bring headaches. And that's the kind of the circle Celtic are trying to square at the moment, which is how do you get the Green Brigade back in on a basis that both sides can live with? At the moment, there is a kind of inability to compromise. And I think we also can't lose sight of the fact, Darragh, that the Green Brigade are not the entire Celtic support. Some people speak as if they are. I mean, you're talking about 200, 250 fans, albeit noisy supporters. But there's a wider issue here. And the wider issue is that the 60,000 who go on a weekly basis are becoming disenfranchised and slightly demotivated and resigned to their fate. The problem for Celtic is that they need change, but nothing changes until everything changes. And I think the only thing that's really going to bring meaningful, tangible change is if there's a change in ownership. And at the moment, the controlling shareholder, Dermot Desmond, shows absolutely no sign of selling up. I mean, I think for him to sell his 34, 35%, it would take something in the region of £100 million or thereabouts. And I don't see anybody queuing up to pay that money for what would be a minority stake in a football club.
What about Michael Nicholson then, Stephen? Because he's obviously come under serious criticism, particularly for the Wilfred Nancy era. And, there was this meeting with the collective. I think I was having a look at the minutes and there seemed to be no kind of indication that the club felt that there was any need for him to disappear. I don't know what you make of the whole situation.
I mean, the club can't say that publicly, can they? They can't come out and say, yes, our chief executive has to go. I think if that happens, it will be done quietly, most likely during the summer. Look, there may come a point where Michael Nicholson himself decides that this is not for him. I mean, I don't know Michael Nicholson. By all accounts, he's a pretty decent guy, but he's not somebody who puts himself out there to communicate with either journalists or with supporters, and that's part of the problem. I think Celtic in the current situation need a leader, somebody who leads from the front. And what you have is a club where absolutely nobody is addressing the issues other than Brian Wilson, the kind of the interim chairman. And that's part of the problem, is that everything about the club is interim. The chairman's interim, the manager is interim, the recruitment team are interim, half the team are interim as well. They need permanent solutions. And that requires leadership. And I think that probably does require a change at the top. But as I say, I think the problems go higher than Michael Nicholson. They go right to the very top, to a controlling shareholder who probably needs to find somebody who can do the day-to-day running of the club and give them autonomy to get on with it. Because at the moment, I think there's question marks over that.
I wonder, Scott, because this is all Stephen's talking about is very big change that is probably required at Celtic. But in the short term, Celtic have a massive run-in now, between now and the end of the season, a massive title fight. What needs to happen to get the fans back on side in the short term?
I think as a player, me obviously being an ex-player, I think look no further sometimes in performance on the pitch. Yes, I totally understand all the aspects of the club that we're talking about, but players still have a responsibility, and so do the coaching staff when they go out on a Saturday, whether it be at Celtic Park or away, that their job's to perform and be organised and have a way of playing which reflects some of the players that they do have in their team, because they're not completely devoid of talent. They have good players. They have spent money on players, whether it's Taneke, guys like Balapisha. The question mark then becomes on what can you get out of the players at your disposal. And for me, I just don't think Celtic are getting enough. I don't think they have since the get-go this season. Martin O'Neill has been a figurehead in terms of leader from that sense of the word for the players, but there has to be some sort of onus on the players' responsibility to go out and perform and do better than they are, because you go through the team, there's so many players who have been there who just aren't performing at the levels that we have seen. And we obviously, as football people, will talk about the unrest from fans, changes at the top, but first and foremost, performance and setting up your team to go out and perform with their players. I just don't think it's been at a level of consistency where Celtic can, and especially fans who are turning up on a Saturday, can really get behind, because they're seeing it with their own eyes. The fall off in quality as a team in the last years been remarkable, in my opinion.
I mean, you look, Scott, you see guys like, I think supporters are talking about this with Daizen Maeda, who last season was the man. Let's be honest, he was scoring all the goals. And look at Rio Hatate as well, who set a really high standard when he came in. And it just looks as if you've got 2 or 3 players who don't necessarily look as if they want to be there any longer. We know that Daizer Maeda had an offer from Wolfsburg in the summer. Celtic held him. He decided to stay on in January to preserve his World Cup place. But I think the issue for Celtic is that they have a massive rebuilding job to do, and they know that already. I mean, I was looking at a list the other day, and I don't think it's unfair to think that when you take into account loans and so on, Celtic will be shipping out something in the region of 18 or 19 players this summer. It's going to be enormous the list of players they have to change, and the amount of squad evolution that needs to be done, and they have to do all that and plan all that while somehow trying to find a way to the end of this season with what you can only describe as sticky plasters.
It's not when you put it like that, Stephen. It's just like it sounds insane, doesn't it? I mean, no other way to put it.
That's the reality, though, Charlotte. When you're watching them week to week, we can talk about scoring goals in last minute games. The 3 games that goals are scored in the last minute are against teams who are at the bottom of the league, and the mentality in the last 10 minutes of a team when you're round that part of the division, your mentality changes the last 10 minutes. You drop off, and that's when the nerves start kicking in. You're hanging on for dear life. Celtic naturally, with the players, will get will force you into a defensive shape and put you under pressure, but there's no consistency in that. You don't get away with that week in, week out, and that was always my view. Once they played a team who were maybe further up with a better mentality about them, they would struggle to win a game, and that's why Hibs go there at the weekend. Yes, Trusty, for me, such a naive reaction to give the referee and the VAR decision to send them off. For me, like, unforgivable at this stage of the season. And after that, Hibs were so comfortable for me, and Hibs worked the ball from one side to the other, something that you're used to seeing Celtic do, and have a nice tidy finish, slot it away, and Hibs were comfortable. But when you're scoring 90 odd minute goals against teams struggling at the bottom of the league, yes, it can build momentum in terms of if you go into the next week and you perform better, but performance levels just nowhere near it from a Celtic perspective.
Well, let's take a closer look at what is happening on the pitch with Martin O'Neill and the players. Because, Stephen, Martin O'Neill, cutting a bit of a frustrated figure at the moment, his post-match comments after the Stuttgart game last week, he was very vocal about VAR at the weekend and again last night. Do you think he knew what he signed up for? Do you think he was expecting, when he came back, a very different Celtic to the one that he finds himself part of now?
No, I don't think he's naive. I think he'd done enough media and punditry, and he'd been up in Scotland often enough doing fan events to see that this is not the team that he was accustomed to 20 years ago, nowhere near it. You don't have any of the attributes that Martin O'Neill's team had. None of the physicality, none of the kind of skill and the pace and the sheer technical ability. So I think he knew he was coming up, as I said earlier, to apply sticking plasters to a gaping wound. And that's pretty much what he's had to do. VAR, I think, is a consequence of the frustration. Because, I saw his comments last night. I think eventually, when it comes to Trusty, I agree with Scott. I think Trusty was incredibly daft. I think they reached the right decision in the end. But I think he expresses fairly legitimate views in terms of the process, in terms of the re-refereeing of the game. The referee, Matthew McDermott's sorry incident, he was going to do what you see so often with these corner incidents. He was going to go over and say to the players, look, calm it, that's enough. But it all was taken out of his hands by the VAR Grant Irvine. I understand that, but Celtic can't be hiding behind that. There are bigger issues which have been self-inflicted, which I think they have to address before they start trying to address the issue of VAR in Scottish football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we know Martin O'Neill and how good he is at managing Scott, and how, everybody talks about how he's able to get the best out of players. Do you worry that is maybe starting to wear off? Yeah,
listen, I think a lot comes down to player responsibility as well. You have if you're comparing him to the team that he managed in his first spell at Celtic, leadership wise, it's nowhere near the level. The guys he had, the leaders throughout the whole spine of the team. That you look at Celtic now, Cal McGregor isn't performing, and first and foremost, your goalkeeper has now become unreliable, which is at this stage of the season is crucial. There's mistakes there, and that's Celtic looking really fragile. So you're looking at the fixture list coming up. You're looking at the games saying you can't guarantee that Celtic are going to go and control the games first and foremost, never mind winning them. That's the biggest thing for me. So if I'm looking at them tactically, the control that you were used to seeing in a Celtic team and building out from the back and working their way into areas where they can go and get their better players on the ball to go and cause damage, I just don't see it to the level that we've seen over the last few years. And that responsibility does come on Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney, because they're the guys who are ultimately setting the team up for the weekend. And out with 10 minutes against Hibs, where I felt in the final third they looked as if there was some combinations there and they were going to go on to create chances, it fell away. And that is just where the team are at the moment. I think that there is a real vulnerability about them. And that game on the weekend against Rangers, for me, if they don't come away with a win there, they could be out of the title race for me if they don't win that game at the weekend. I know there's still a long way to go, but I just think momentum is such a big thing in football. And if they can come away with a win against Rangers, then that maybe completely switch the mindset. But ultimately at this moment, there's just a real vulnerability about the squad and the lack of consistency in performance for me, which is such a big thing in football now. I think it's there for all to see.
I think you're right, Scott. I think even after the loss at Hibs, the title hopes are kind of looking a bit shaky. But if they lose at Rangers, it could all of a sudden, Stephen, this season totally unravel. Because if they don't win the league, they've got the Scottish Cup quarter-final against Rangers. If they're they're potentially staring down the barrel at nothing this season.
It's always dangerous to preempt these things, but I think even going into that Rangers game at the weekend, you look at Hearts are playing Aberdeen, a winnable home game, which could put them 9 points clear of Celtic before a ball was kicked. You then look at Motherwell, who are playing against Dundee United as well. They're playing on Saturday. They could narrow the gap on third place from fourth to 1 point. So there is pressure coming at Celtic from everywhere, and it really is a time for players to stand up and be counted. The problem is that you're not looking at this team and looking at their mental or physical capabilities and thinking they're necessarily entirely capable of that. That's a question they really have to answer, because they haven't done it terribly often so far this season. And of course, you have the added consequence of Austin Trusty's red card is that they're going to have to make a big decision in central defence. Benjamin Arthur was brought in as a kind of a lone sticking plaster from Brentford. We've also got Dane Murray, who could play alongside Liam Scales. That's not a scenario you would want to be going into your biggest defining games of the season with. And that's probably partly underpinning Martin O'Neill's frustration with VAR as well. But it's a situation of their own making, because their squad management, their player trading has been poor, and they really don't have anybody else to blame for this situation but themselves.
Scott, Stephen mentions there the threat of Motherwell behind them as well. You look at this table right now, and there is a scenario, and it's not too outlandish to suggest that Celtic could finish fourth this season.
Yeah. There's no getting away from it. It's incredible, really. That's the conversation we're having after, obviously, what we've seen of Celtic over the last short while. But for me, Motherwell, do you know what I think it's really interesting? If you're a player, if you're one of the Celtic players and you've played against Motherwell this season, they played against them twice and Motherwell have been fantastic, you're looking at them, they don't concede goals, and then you look at their style of play, the Celtic players will know that. I genuinely do think that will not be a game that Celtic players will roll up and think they know now they have to be on it when they come up against a Motherwell side. Motherwell just look, they're just taking the game after game, winning games. They have the dominance in nearly every fixture this season. A Motherwell side who, and that goes, it's took a guy from Denmark to come into the country, and he's out coached basically the full division at times this year. Remarkable the job he's done there, and as I says, when you have the foundations, we are not conceding goals first and foremost, and then you add in the X factor, which is the style of play and the control and the goals and some of the attacking play from Masmanise, Just, Slattery, who's been outstanding the last few weeks. They are not an easy game for anybody in the league, and I do feel the Celtic players will understand that the qualities they bring. So Hearts, look at Aberdeen at home. Hearts now have some more injury problems. I've seen Aberdeen during the week. I think they've scored an away goal for about 3 or 4 games, Aberdeen, so you'd quite like to think that Hearts will take care of business at Tynecastle at the weekend, and that game's played on Saturday, so Celtic are then getting in with more pressure. If they don't win against Rangers, the point margin becomes even bigger, and that's the mental challenge for these Celtic players.
We talk about Motherwell, Stephen. Dare I mention their manager and Celtic? I mean, do you think Celtic are looking at him and thinking, if not him, then somebody of that ilk?
Absolutely should be. I mean, look, you are very loath to write off Martinelli at this stage because it's an old stage, he's been over the course, and if he does win this league, as I said before, it would be a clamour for him to get another year. But if this season goes the way I think people were beginning to fear it might, then Celtic have a lot of planning to do. We referred earlier to the huge number of players they need to turn over in their squad. Before that, they need a manager to do it. And time will be of the essence. You know, I was talking to senior people at Rangers the other night, they were saying that they're back on June the 18th for pre-season training. There's no time to waste. You can't be waiting. I think if you're Celtic for the end of the World Cup to see if Roberto Martinez will hitch his horse to the wagon. I think Celtic need to move fairly quickly, and the obvious and easy way to do that is to go to Motherwell on June the 1st and say, we would like permission to speak to your manager. Get him in, let him have 2 weeks, and then get on with the business of rebuilding the squad with a manager who's shown, okay, people have their concerns about maybe being a one-off, but he has shown that he knows how to get results and get a team performing in the Scottish Premiership. I think the crazy thing is it's now 32 years since Celtic actually took a manager from another Scottish club. It was Tommy Burns in 1994. Since then, I've taken managers from Japan, from Norway, from MLS, from the Dokyu. I think it's probably time to look on their own doorstep because there's a guy there who's banging on the door, and despite the reservations of some supporters, I think there's a really strong case for Jens Bertolaescu being an ex-Celtic manager.
I happen to know that he's a big fan of custard creams, so if that is what is needed to sweeten the deal, then
I think you should get your coat, to be honest with you. I mean, that's an absolute shocker. It really is.
It's true. They could.
You're taking the biscuit with that one, Charlotte. Really,
hey, that was good.
Thank you. I'm here all week.
Right, well, let's move on to tonight's game in Stuttgart because, Scott, what do they do? I mean, 4-1 down after the first leg. They need a miracle in order to claw something back from the game, but I don't know. How do they handle it?
Well, it's 2 ways. I think they probably know the reality of coming away there and being through to the last stages is such a long shot that it might show a bit of freedom in their play. Might do. But what I expect is the Celtic be pinned back for large spells tonight. And what I would say is when they've been under that sort of pressure in games in Europe away, especially under Martinelli, they've defended fairly well. So I think looking at it for me, I think the best way to look at it is can they get a good defensive performance first and foremost. I think not concede goals, as Stephen said. He was saying 3-0. They'd be happy with that and let the wins understand it. But I think can they go there and defend really well, get back to the basics, look after the ball when they have it. You would envisage there would be changes tonight, guys in the squad coming in for minutes with the obviously all eyes on Ibrox at the weekend. But for me, first and foremost, can they get a solid defensive performance as a team and manage to frustrate Stuttgart at times? I just don't think there's enough in the squad to really go over there, dominate the game and score goals without scoring goals if they're playing that free-flowing football that we were so used to seeing Celtic over the last few years. So for me, it's got to be back to basics, defend properly and make it hard for Stuttgart and at least get some sort of momentum leading into Ibrox.
It does make me think a wee bit about that Real Betis game a few years ago where I can't remember, but Celtic were out of the competition by that point and made a load of changes to their team and ended up beating Betis, I think 4-2 in the end, but they were out, so it didn't matter. But I mean, the other thing that's interesting is last week after the first game against Stuttgart, Neil bemoaned this gap in finances between these teams. You look at Bodo Glimt, who have just beaten Inter Milan over 2 legs, beaten them in both legs. That's surely what Celtic should be aiming for, and to have seasons like that and be able to compete like that.
It's quite ironic because that aborted AGM descended into turmoil when Desmond's son Ross made a speech on the stage where he spoke about the unsustainable gap between the haves and the have-nots in European football now, that had grown since 2023 even, and that, Celtic couldn't swing and miss. They were taking a big risk. They had to be sustainable. Well, Bodo Glimt are their worst nightmare at the moment because Bodo Glimt are going with a fraction of the turnover with the wage bill and the spend. And they're showing that if you have a good, sustainable model and structure, that you can compete with the big clubs in Europe. Now, people will say that Bodo Glimt, they don't have to win their title every year like Celtic do. They don't face the same demands and the same pressure. But what this run to the last 16 will do for Bodo Glimt is it will give them an amount of money which will put them far out of the reach of other clubs in Norway. The question is, what do you do with that money? Celtic have made all that money for the Champions League in recent seasons. They haven't used it well at all. That's why they're in this situation at the moment. So yeah, Bodo Glimt are a bit of an embarrassment to Celtic at the moment. I think they show that actually the kind of defeatism might be a bit misplaced, and actually if they restructure their football department and if they do what they need to do and get serious about actually trying to compete in Europe, maybe there's a way to do it.
Maybe. Scott, what about tonight then? The team that is out on the pitch. How do you see it? I mean, Trusty, you would have thought will start, given that he's missing at the weekend due to his red card. Does Callum McGregor get a start? How do you see Martin O'Neill playing this one?
I'd be amazed if Callum McGregor doesn't play, because he plays every game, I think. And that does take its toll, and he's done that consistently over the last few seasons. It's the amount of games he actually has to play in, especially this season. He's getting older as well. You should be at a stage where Celtic can rest Callum McGregor for certain games. I think you'll have to go back to the Scottish Cup game against Auchinleck. Was that a game that Callum McGregor necessarily had to play in? For me, it would have been an ideal opportunity maybe. Rest his legs. They didn't perform. They changed other parts of the team, but they didn't change Callum McGregor. So I don't expect anything other than Callum McGregor to start tonight, to be totally honest. But that's just a reflection of maybe the lack of trust in other players coming into that position in the midfield and performing.
Well, you can listen to live commentary from tonight's game in Stuttgart on BBC Radio Scotland Extra from 5 o'clock. That is all we've got time for. Many thanks to Scott and Stephen, and thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on your phone. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and we will catch you again tomorrow.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
They caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.